All right, so we're going to wrap up the Reformation and touch upon the English Reformation. It's also known as the Henrician Reformation because of Henry VIII, and as you can see here, it really becomes an issue between his marriage and his relationships. And England was different from the rest of Europe because it broke off from the Catholic Church before adopting the Protestant ideas, whereas before with Luther and Calvin, right, they have the different Protestant doctrine and theology, and from that difference is going to break them away. Okay, so as we go through this lecture, I want you to think about what's the difference between the English Reformation and Luther's Reformation. Compare and contrast. What are the causes? What are the effects between that? Okay, so we're focusing specifically on Henry VIII. As you can see here, this is kind of the children of Henry VII. Henry VIII is going to be king in 1509. He's going to be marrying Catherine of Aragon, who actually was previously married to Henry's brother, older brother, Arthur, but Arthur died in 1502, as you can see to the left. And eventually he wants to divorce Catherine of Aragon, which we'll get there. Right? But they have before his divorce, they have a daughter named Mary. Okay? So let's talk about Henry VIII a little bit of background about him. This portrait was painted by Hans Holbein, a very famous painter, and he is showing that Henry is a Renaissance man, right? He knows how to wrestle, he knows how to hunt, all these things. He's very confident, showing a lot of power. Look at his stance, right? And he has this really big, thick figure. Henry VIII wanted to be the Holy Roman Emperor. He actually put himself as a possible candidate to be elected, and he's going to be a guy that's going to have 6 wives. That's what he's going to be known for. One thing to know is that part of his early reign was that he actually was in support of the Catholic Church before he broke off, right? So he brought Reformation to his country because of his own selfish desires, right? But essentially, he is trying to expand his influence in Europe, which his dad could not do before. And Henry VII avoided war, but Henry VIII is going to be very much part of the kind of affairs of Europe. We talked about the rivalry between Francis, Henry VIII, and also Charles V. Okay, so Henry, like I said, is in support of the Catholic Church, and he wrote a defense of the 7 sacraments. Okay, this was where he was actually attacking Luther's new ideas, and because of that, the Pope actually awarded him the title, the Defender of the Faith. Okay, so the Pope was in support of Henry VIII. They had a good relationship. At this time, before the English Reformation, Henry VIII is Catholic. He's very Catholic, and he supports that. He's anti-Luther, and he's given this title. Okay. In addition, what happens is that there's this anti-French alliance that happens between England and Spain, and England and the Holy Roman Empire. Essentially, anyone that is against France, England is there. Okay, and so how this really originated was there's a union between Arthur and Catherine, right, his older brother, and Catherine, right, who is Princess of Aragon. And so at that time, they got married, but then that didn't happen. So in order to keep the English and Spanish alliance, right, he had to marry her. That was Henry VII's cry and plea. Okay, and so what ends up happening is, as well as Henry VIII is going to war with Scotland. Okay, and Scotland is going to be an ally of France. So basically, anyone who is anti-England, France is on their side. It's just, we talked about this. Your friends, your enemy's friend is your friend. Did I say right? No. Your enemy's enemy is your friend. Yeah, there you go. All right. So I had to think for a bit. Okay. So eventually, Henry VIII is going to defeat the Scots. We don't touch upon Scotland too much, but every now and then we will. Okay. And in addition, right, his daughter Mary, right, is going to be marrying Philip II, who is, right, the son of Charles V, It's crazy. It's really kind of like all over the place, right? But Spain is anti-France, and so that's another type of kind of diplomatic relationship, marriage based upon alliances. Okay, um, yeah. After that, Henry's going to be the mediator between Spain and France, and hoping to gain power. He's eventually going to choose on the side of Charles V in 1520. Okay, but let's get to the meat of it. So the divorce is the reason as why England's going to have a Reformation. Henry wants a son, right? And in his mind, by not having a son and only having a daughter, right, it's his greatest failure. And over time, he just begins to feel like, it's not even me anymore. It's my wife's fault, right? It's Catherine's fault. So Catherine of Aragon is essentially the person, but as you guys know, right, it's the chromosome, right, from the male, not the female, that dictates the gender. So what ends up happening is he wants a divorce. Okay, not only does he want a divorce because he thinks that Catherine is insufficient, inadequate to give him a son, but he also falls for this woman named Anne Boleyn, right? So she's a beautiful woman, right? Very strong-willed. She's Protestant, actually. That's going to be a slight influence, but not a complete one. Okay. Do I need to go into this? Yeah. Basically, as you could know, right, as a king, right, Henry VIII is very promiscuous, right? He's very out there in having relationships and affairs with many ladies of the court. So it's not anything new that Catherine of Aragon didn't see coming. Okay. All right. In comes our first Thomas. Now, I'll be going over many different Thomases, and for whatever reason, they're all very closely working with Henry. And they're all named Thomas, and it's annoying, right? It's annoying, but that's what they're named. That's what the parents chose them to be called. Okay, so first Thomas is Cardinal Thomas Wolsey. Okay, Wolsey essentially is going to be Chancellor of England. He's the cardinal, right? He's the go-to man, a very ambitious guy in supporting Henry VIII, right? And he basically has a dictatorship over the English Church. He had really had one job to do, according to Henry, and that was to go to the Pope and ask for him to have a proper divorce. Remember, divorce is not allowed according to the Catholic Church, right? Because it's the union, right? It's holy matrimony. It's one of the 7 sacraments, essentially, right? And so the only reason why they would have an annulment is because he was, forced to marry his brother's wife, which he felt like that was a sin, right, which was taken from a verse in the Bible, taken out of context. Now, Thomas Wolsey was sent to Rome in 1527, and he's going to meet Pope Clement VII, and in the end, he fails. He fails, and because of that, Thomas Wolsey is going to lose his position. Why would he fail to get the divorce approval from the Pope? Well, Clement VII is in Rome at this time. Right, Rome is actually under the control of German soldiers. Remember, the sack of Rome comes in 1527. And so Charles V is kind of like overseeing Italy and specifically Rome at that time. And so the Pope is saying, hey, I can't really upset Charles V. And why would Charles V be upset is because Catherine of Aragon is Charles V's aunt. I know, it seems kind of weird, right? It seems kind of weird where you have Henry VIII marrying the aunt of Charles V, but he's competing with Charles V, right? It just, dynastic marriages makes it kind of crazy, right? And so essentially did not get the marriage. Henry is upset, right? And essentially Anne is going to become pregnant. So even before the divorce actually happening, Anne becomes pregnant. And this is known as the king's great matter. I mean, like, what do I do, right? The baby's going to come. They know it's going to be the dad. What's going to happen? He's going to bring in Thomas Cranmer, okay? So Thomas Cranmer is going to be the new archbishop, and he's actually, the second Thomas, right? He's actually a good friend of Anne Boleyn, okay? So over time, okay, Henry VIII is going to be working with Parliament in order for him to gain more power over the church. He is essentially going to being allowed to appoint bishops, right? Before, in every country, only the Pope can appoint bishops, but now he's saying, Parliament, grant me the right to appoint bishops, and so he picks Thomas Cranmer, and now he's the Archbishop of Canterbury, right? And from that, a few acts are going to come out, right? according to the authority of the Archbishop of Canterbury and also the authority of Parliament, certain acts or laws are going to be put in place where they're going to set the divorce, the annulment of marriage, right? The void of marriage, that's to annul something, right? Between Henry and Catherine, okay? And so he's going to eventually going to marry Anne, and then Anne's going to give birth, and that's how it's going to kind of all work, this whole switcheroo, okay? So the acts are most important right now. All that kind of stuff is kind of like the story, yeah, how the movie happens, okay? So in 1532 to 1534, a couple acts. First act is going to be the Act of Supremacy, really important, right? This is going to give Henry power to break away from the church officially. The Act of Supremacy officially says that whoever is the English king, the monarch at that time, is the protector and only supreme head of the church and clergy of England, right? So no longer is the authority of Pope valid, right? At that time, the English monarch has complete authority over the Church of England, okay? The second act is the Act of Succession. This is going to say that only the legitimate offspring of Henry and Anne, right, are established. Okay, so before many people are saying, "Oh, what the heck? Like, who is, the rightful heir? Is it Mary? Is it Elizabeth? Because that's the daughter of Catherine, or is it the daughter of Anne Boleyn, right? So because he has many wives, they're saying who is illegitimate? It's like whoever that the king is rightfully married to at that moment, that is the legitimate offspring. Okay, it gets confusing because he has kids with different women, but you'll be okay. Okay, all right. So Act of Supremacy also says that whoever wants to work for the king must take an oath in saying that yes, the king is the supreme ruler over England and also the Church of England. Okay, and the Pope is no more and rejected. Okay, now we're going to talk about Thomas More, Englishman, really important as far as being part of the English Reformation. He's a humanist as background, right? He's going to serve in many different official capacities under Henry VIII, and he's going to write this famous book named Utopia. Okay, so he's a devoted Catholic, friend of Erasmus. He's going to be elected to Parliament in 1501. And Utopia is what he's known for. Okay, it's written in two parts. Part one is saying, hey, you know what? In Europe, there are a lot of social, political, and economic problems. Right? You have greedy landlords that are going to, kick people off their land and make money instead of giving them homes and housing, and people are just messed up. Okay, that's his first part of Utopia. His second part of Utopia is essentially saying that, you know what? There could be a nation where people, if they just thought about it, can actually work together in harmony, right? We actually live together and support one another instead of just trying to be greedy and selfish. We can be communal, right? We'll live and work together. We'll be responsible. We'll be tolerant of a religion, and we don't really care for wealth. Happy-go-lucky. Yes, life is great. That was his idea, and this really established Thomas More as a humanist, as is right. Okay, so 1524, he's going to be part of the House of Commons. He's going to be the official speaker, and he's going to also take Cardinal Wolsey's place in a position beneath the king. Okay, his job at that time was actually to help Henry write the Defense of the Sacraments, his anti-Luther essay, and he helped Henry gain that title of Defender of the Faith. Okay, so one thing to know is that he actually really supported the Catholic Church. He didn't like the abuses. He recognized that, right? But he says, the Mass, the service, the worship service, and the authority of the Pope, good, right? He's actually supporting this. Thomas More did not want Henry VIII to break away from the Catholic Church. So what happens when 1534 Act of Supremacy established by Parliament comes out, right? He refuses to take the oath and saying, you know what? I'm not going to say that you are no longer going to be under the Pope, right? I cannot allow that. He says, unto the oath that there was offered me, I could not swear without jeopardizing of my soul to perpetual damnation. Okay, you cannot break away from the church and say you're no longer under the Pope, right? That's heretical, essentially. So Thomas More, right, is going to be thrown in prison. He's going to be tried. He's going to be a traitor. Okay, and because of that, he's going to be executed, and he's going to be a symbol as a martyr in dying, right, in terms of resisting against a despot leader. Okay, Yeah, Thomas More, humanist. All right, so now we have the Church of England. Henry is a new head. Okay, what are some of the outcomes that come from this? Here's to list a few. One is that Henry is going to be excommunicated by the Pope, right? You're officially kicked out of the Catholic Church because you're not honoring me in my rightful authority, position of authority. Okay. Then also all of the payments that went to the Pope before to Rome from England are now going to the crown, which is Henry, right? So all that money is going to him. If you question the king at all, right, for religious matters, for political matters, that was seen as treason. Okay, the Bible is also going to be translated to English. All these outcomes are coming, right? And only a few changes were going to be made in terms of church beliefs and practices. And the reason why is because Henry, for the most part, is going to remain a Catholic in practice. He really only wanted to break away from the Catholic Church because the Pope did not allow him to grant the divorce. So he says, now I'm the head. Divorce is fine because I call the shots. Okay, but as far as religion and what he was doing in practice, Mass and all that kind of stuff, right, the Eucharist, all those type of sacraments, he wanted to keep. Okay, essentially most of his court and even Parliament is going to be part of Protestant, right? They're going to believe in Protestantism, but he's going to prevent any radical Protestant doctrine from coming in. He's going to institute the statute, right, the laws of the 6 Articles of 1539. What this is essentially is saying, you know, the English Church is going to keep a lot of Catholic teaching in terms of the 7 sacraments. The clergy must be celibate, right, and transubstantiation as well. Even though it's split from Rome, it's split from the Roman Catholic Church, they're keeping those things. So what we can say is the English Church at this point looks exactly the same, except that they're associated as Protestant. Confusing a little bit, okay? All right, in comes our next Thomas Cromwell, not Cranmer, Cromwell, okay? He's going to help Henry make the English government more efficient, right? He's going to crush any opposition that is going against this Protestant movement, okay? Cranmer, even though Cranmer, not Cromwell, Cranmer, just to backtrack a little bit, he's actually for, right, the Protestant teachings and stuff. He's actually for the English Bible, whereas Wolsey and More, no, they don't want that. They want to keep it really Catholic, okay? All right, so really important part, that's part of Thomas Cromwell's kind of his plans of how to improve the government was that he's going to confiscate all of the church lands, okay? All monasteries, okay? All property that the church had. That's 25% of all the land in England. That's a quarter of the land. That's a whole lot of land. So the king has now just swallowed up all of this land, right? And all that wealth from the church, right, is now going to the crown. Before, the church was 3 times more wealthy than the monarch was, right? But now, if you take all that, hey, the crown is doing really well. The king is doing really well, okay? And so you have 10,000 monks and nuns losing their homes, given just a little bit left over, right? And what is he going to do with all the land? The king is going to sell them to nobles to finance his wars, right? And so by selling it to the nobles, the nobility is actually on his side, kind of the new peerage, all that good stuff, okay? So England is going to be pretty open to Protestant ideas. I'll say one thing though, right? Most of the population still favored Catholicism at this point, right? Some are going to be rebelling against these new Protestant laws, but really they're still practicing a very Catholic religion, okay? All right, so why is England open to Protestant ideas? Well, there's a lot of anti-papacy because they felt that, you know, like just like in the rest of Europe, the Pope was, you know, very corrupt. The Catholic Church was very corrupt and abusing their power. Some Protestant ideas have already filtered into England from merchants sailing all over to different towns and cities that brought in the Protestant belief, right? And that's kind of where it was. Also, Cambridge and Oxford were universities, and a lot of Protestant ideas were brought over there as well, okay? So here you have kind of this woodcut. It's a depiction of, you know, the English Reformation and the antagonists in it, right? So you have Henry VIII sitting on the throne. Then you have him stepping upon Pope Clement VII, and to his right you have Thomas Cromwell, and then you have to the left you have Thomas Cranmer, right? And they both are supporting Henry. Thomas's all over the board. I know, it's crazy. All right, really important here. I want you to take a look at this. You can pause the video if you want to. essentially as time progresses, you can kind of see where do the different branches of Christianity kind of break off, right? Starting from the bottom, right, it's kind of the least change from the Catholic Church, right, to the top, most radical change, right, the Anabaptists, most change from the Catholic Church, right? So if you look at Anglicanism, this is the English Church. They're going to call it Anglicanism, and that's what the English Church is believing in, okay? Where you have the Lutherans that's following Luther, and you go up a little bit more, you have the Calvinists, right? And so if you kind of see these offshoots of all these different kinds, the farther you're away from the x-axis is the more radical, the more different you are from the Catholic Church. So if you look at Anglicanism in England, right, not much has really changed. I mean, the only reason why it's changed is because the head of the church is different, but practices are pretty much the same, okay? All right, moving on. 1536, you have the Pilgrimage of Grace. This is a rebellion that broke out in northern part of England, and they're listing a bunch of economic grievances, religious grievances, and they're those that basically are going against the new Protestant laws, okay? They're going against Henry's Reformation, and they call this the Pilgrimage of Grace because you have peasants, you have nobility, anyone that is in support of keeping Catholicism, right? They were there to protest. This was one of the largest protests ever in English history. Most people really accepted these Protestant changes. However, they had really bad tempers. Some would even just revolt and protest in this sense. And this is, you know, in their action against Thomas Cromwell. Remember, Cromwell was the guy that's trying to make the government more efficient and putting these laws out. Okay. All right. So yeah, they're against Henry's break of the Catholic Church and also taking away the church lands. Okay. Here is an example of the banner that they would hold up, right? And so, as you can see here, this is the wounds of Christ, and they're holding up the banner, right, and saying this is what we really believe in, right? Catholicism, and you have the different piercings of the wounds of Christ during the crucifixion. Okay, and you have the wreath of thorns. Okay, all right, last slide. Let's get through this. So, the English Reformation does not just end with when Henry dies, but it carries on, and it kind of goes back and forth amongst his children. Okay, so I'm going to go over his children very quickly. His son, who actually finally has, okay, so his third wife, Jane Seymour, is going to have a son. Yay, he's actually had a son. He's really happy. Okay, Henry's going to die. He's not going to realize that his son, when he takes over, he's only going to be 10. Okay, and so when he's 10 and he's the king, right, he's just a figurehead. I mean, like, what do you know at 10 years old, right? You know, like 3 times 3, essentially, right? So, sorry. Okay, so through Edward VI, okay, he is going to have other people govern in his place, right? And from that, a lot of Protestant practices are going to be introduced because those that govern in his place, like his uncle, right, are really Protestant, okay? He's going to have an early death. He's going to die in 1553. He's going to live for, like, I think 15 years old. That's it, right? But under him, a lot of Protestant practices are clergy can marry, okay, removing any types of like icons or images of religious figures, right? Communion is going to be provided, you know, and held by the lay people, the laity, the average person, average man. New doctrines, salvation by faith alone, right? This is under just Edward's rule, okay? Not transubstantiation, but just symbolic, okay? Symbolic communion, right? And only holding to baptism and communion as the 2 sacraments, right? So really Protestant changes under those few years, right? Then after that point, right, when he dies, it's going to lead to a huge Protestant and Catholic struggle because, right, his half-sister Mary, who is the daughter of Catherine and Henry, okay, she's going to come in, super devout Catholic, okay, and she's going to reimpose Roman Catholicism. That's what his mom, her mom was, right? And she has a lot of angst, really, because she feels like she has to kind of prove and bring England back away from what her dad kind of screwed up, okay? And so she's going to be known as Bloody Mary. People are going to accept her, not just because she's Catholic, but because she's the most legitimate heir, like she's the first daughter, right? And she's going to try to introduce, right, Catholicism again by having these mass executions and burning people at the stake. She actually kills 300 important people, such as a lot of bishops, and Archbishop Thomas Cranmer is going to be one of those 300 people that are considered to be dissenters. Okay, so anyone that was, staunchly Protestant, because she's Catholic, then she's going to put him down. She even marries Philip II of Spain, and Philip is going to be. We're going to talk about him right in the next section. But Philip II is really a huge Catholic general, right? He is the King of Spain, but he's going to be a huge Catholic figurehead as well. Okay. After Mary the First, you're going to have Elizabeth the First, and I'm actually going to spend a whole lot of time on Elizabeth because she's really key as far as connecting the Reformation with the religious wars. Okay.